Hi there and welcome to this digital painting tutorial where we will be going over how to make this seamless pattern. And welcome to my channel, Creatively Me with Bree. And yes, you guessed it, I'm Bree. These are the elements that we will be working with today that we will first need to paint before we create our seamless pattern. This part will definitely take the longest, and if you want to make a simpler pattern, by all means you can still follow along. Here is an example of the sketches that I started with, and those were the finished products. These are the colors that I worked within. If you head on over to the Actions button, Canvas, go down to Canvas Information. This is where you can title your piece and sign your name if you wish. These are the dimensions we're working in, 5,000 pixels by 5,000 pixels at 300 dpi. And this is the color profile we will be using. It is the second option from the top. It is also the default color profile. So I'm going to add a layer so that it is below the sketch. And I'm going to pick my first color, which is this blue. And I'm going to use the Inka brush for this. So first, I'm going to make sure there are no resets that I need to make. I'm going to duplicate the brush and click on it. Then I'm going to go down to taper, because you can see here the edge is not tapered, and I would like a tapered edge. And those are the only adjustments that I make. Hit done. So now I should have the brush the way that I would like to use it for the remainder of this project. What I'm trying to do is essentially create an outline around the main shape so that I can easily fill it in. Now that I've taken off the sketch, I can see more clearly where there might be some areas that I need to touch up or fix. If there are any gaps to where I've already drawn, this would be the time to do that so that when I go to color fill, it fills correctly and within the lines that I've drawn. I'm going to the eraser and I'm selecting the Inka brush that we made so that I can touch up and fix any of the edges that I don't like, while also keeping the integrity of the brush that we selected. This process might seem a little slow and tedious, and it is. Hand drawing everything out can take time. Like I said, this is the bulk of the project. The seamless pattern part is actually one of the easier portions. However, you will be doing a game of art Tetris, as I like to call it. And so I'll show you how to make the pattern itself once we get these elements drawn. Once I have the base shape down and I like the way that it looks, I'm going to add a new layer and I'm going to make it a clipping mask. Now I'm going back into my color palette and I'm picking this, and it's a orangish brown color, and I'm using that as the T. As I've said with the previous lines, make sure that you keep them closed so when you go to color fill, it fills correctly. This is the time and opportunity that you want to take to make sure that you get the shape of everything the way that you want before you combine layers. I noticed that when I was editing that I got a little too fixated on fixing up the edges and line work. And for this piece, it really didn't need that. So try to remember, keep it loose. Enjoy the process. Don't get caught in perfection. It's all going to work out. Now, we're about to add a nice lighter orange color on top of the T to create, a sense of like a ripple in the T, so that it's not a flat T. Now, if you go over and look at the layers, which you're going to see in a moment here, there we go, layers high. You want a layer that's between the coffee cup and the T itself, and we're going to draw right in between those two layers so that it appears as a shadow. Right there. Again, I got really fixated on some of the details here. It's not really necessary. Of course, it's your work, so by all means, do what works for you. But I could have easily let this go and just allowed the lines, which I love. One of the things about this brush is um, the jagged edges and the not clean, super clean lines. Like, yes, it gives clean lines, but it's not like perfect. And I love that about this. And I really overdid it in some of these touch up parts. And I am still working on that layer that is between the mug, the teacup, and the tea itself to create those shadows on the side. Now I'm going to pick a lighter color, sort of a beige, and I'm going to combine those three layers together that we've been working on. On a new layer, I'm going to create a clipping mask, and on the clipping mask, I am going to draw in the design on the side of this teacup. I'm going to drag the color over so that I can color fill. Make sure, once again, that you have everything. See that? Make sure that you have everything colored in, that there are no gaps for the color to leak out of. Hence what you're seeing here is me closing up any of those open areas. And now I can color fill. This can expedite the project much faster, assuming that, unlike me, you actually closed up the gaps. Now I'm going back in with the eraser and I'm just touching this up to have it look just a little bit nicer. But again, don't get carried away. I feel like I got a little carried away on the details here, details that would not be seen unless you're super close to the project like I am. Now we're going to grab a slightly lighter version of that beige, and I'm using it to create some line detail on the, I'll call it floral elements going on. I am now going to just create these little like almost berry dots. I don't know, they're just added detail. You can, of course, change up any of the details you want on your own teacup. It's your teacup, so, whatever's special to you, make it yours. And when I feel good about how it looks, I'm going to combine the layers. So that way, now I have my one teacup complete. And now I can draw the next element. We're trying to keep an element to a layer. So that way it's easy to keep track of and easy to move around later on in the project. It might be a bit difficult to see here, but this color is a gray light blue color. I would call it like ice. It reminds me of ice, but it is difficult to see. I'm not sure it translates with the camera, but I wanted to let you know that the color is in fact a very light blue. And now that we have that element done, we're going on a new layer to the next element, which is this gray-green. And now we're going to make this floral element. This color palette is definitely on the more muted side, and it's definitely more in the grays. So you, of course, can choose a different color palette. I do tend to like darker color palettes and more muted colors, but I have been pushing myself recently for brighter colors. So, go with what feels good for you in your specific project. Okay, and now we're going to add, yet again, a new layer. And on this layer, we are going to paint these flowers. This is a very light pink with gray undertones. And thankfully, it's very simple. I feel that while it is a tedious project, it's also fairly simple designs. And I've tried to have it on a limited color palette as much as possible. I find that my pieces tend to turn out better when I actually give myself limits on my colors, because otherwise, who knows how it's going to end up. Once I have the first initial base color down, that dusty rose color, I'm then going to go into this yellow that's a little on the dark side. It's very mustard-esque. Dark mustard. Spicy, there we go, like a spicy mustard. And then I'm going to go for a like Dijon for the added details. I really hope that I'm making sense. Now you could leave these as is, but if you want to add some additional detail, you can choose a slightly darker version of the color you've been working in and paint it in just to give some additional color dynamics. Again, this was a last minute decision. You don't have to do this. It's totally fine not having these additional painting details. I decided give it a shot. Why not? And now that we're going to work on a new element, this other floral design, we want a new layer. I do choose this ice blue again, but I do end up lightening it after. But I do go with something that's a little bit closer to white. It may not appear that it's that blue right now, but you will notice later on in the project when I adjust the color. And I scribble in those petals. Once I like my scribbles that somewhat look like petals, I then grab a very dark blue. It's like the color of the background essentially, and I'm going to draw in the floral details now, which aren't much. This is it. I just wanted the center of the flower to be present. All right, and I zoom out so I can look at my overall piece and how it's coming along. I want to work on the tea bags now, so I'm going to add a new blank layer. I'm going to select this cream color, and that's me with my OCD checking that I did in fact start on a new layer. I oftentimes edit out how often I actually check things. It can take me quite a while to finish projects because of my checking. If you have OCD, hi, you're not alone. It can be debilitating at times. Thankfully, it's not too bad here in my life, but there are some other areas. There are other areas. So on a new layer, I'm doing a clipping mask. You don't really need the clipping mask for this, but I just did it as a precaution because I'm not going to draw off of the tea bag at all. I'm literally drawing within it. And the details that I do add, I still draw directly on top. I take the opportunity here to fix the shape that is going on that I'm not enjoying. And then I'm going back to that clipping mask layer that doesn't have to be a clipping mask, but it's okay if you use it as one. I think I undo that in just a moment here. And yeah, I take it off because I do need to add a layer underneath, and I don't want it to be a clipping mask. And if I had added it underneath, it would have made it one. So I want it to be on top of the beige colored or cream colored tea, but I wanted it to be underneath the brown staple type thing there. I know, really technical terms. Here I choose a slightly brighter, more cream color to add to the palette, and I'm making sure I'm on the right layer. And now I'm just going to add in some details just to help give it a little bit more depth. Now that I like the way that looks, I'm going to merge the layers together. If you're having a hard time merging layers together by pinching with your fingers, you can click on the layer and select merge down. The same way that you get into the option for clipping mask or alpha lock, you just click and at the bottom you'll see merge down or combine down. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the last tea bag, same method. The one difference here is I add a layer on top of the tea, and that is where I add these additional details in that really light cream color. I just wanted it to have even more highlight. And I do add some more highlight as well on the first one. So here it is. You're seeing that right there. And you're going to see me add that to the first tea that we made. There we go. Now that I like the way that that looks, I'm going to combine all the layers together so that now the tea is all on one layer together. Now I'm going to work on the dandelions. I'm going to select that very Dijon mustard color, the lighter of the two yellows, the one that has a bit more gray to it. And yeah. And then on a new layer, I'm doing the darker yellow, the darker mustard. And then I'm going to, on another new layer, add some, I don't know, shadow shapes in there to help give the illusion of details to our dandelion. Look how cute it is, with such little detail in 3 colors. Now that I know that I like it, I'm going to combine it into one layer, add a new layer, and now I'm going to draw the second dandelion. I go through phases of liking tea. Usually I get really into tea in the fall and winter, and then I forget that tea exists, and I get really into coffee. So it's been a while. I'm excited to break out my tea. All right, and now I'm going to add just a little bit of detail. And then on a new layer, so that it's underneath the green stem part of this flower, I am going to add the foundational shape and color of this dandelion. And then I'm going to color fill. And I'm going to hide the sketch so that I can see what shape I'm working with and get it, fixed up in a way that I like. So I do take the eraser and reshape a little bit down here. Then I add my secondary color on a new layer. And now I'm going in with that brown and I'm just adding some, shadow shading, whatever you'd like to call it. And I could combine the two dandelions together now, and I should have. I do later in the project, but because they're the same, I try to keep same elements or like elements on the same layer to keep it easy to manage, but I don't right here. So that's up to you, your personal call. Now I'm going to work on these floral elements that are in this vase. How do you say it? All right, finally, now we're moving on to the next part, which is adding the flower itself. I'm using that very light pink, that dusty rose pink color. And I'm about to add an element that I don't actually have sketched out, but I have the space for, so I'm going to do it because I think it's this space is just showing me that there is room for another element to be added. So I'm going to essentially add the same type of floral that I just made, just independent of a vase or a vase. Personally, I say vase. I'm just saying. Just saying. All right, and now we're going to go back to the vase and we're going to add a layer after I combine what I have so far that I like. And I'm going to pick that ice blue color that I was telling you guys about. And I'm just going to create the shape of this vase. It does not have to be perfect. I don't know if I'm saying that more for you or for me, but it's both. It's both. It's for us both, okay? Now I'm going to use the eraser to get the shape looking just a little bit better than it does because it's not cute. It's not a cute shape right now. Perfect? No, I'm not looking for perfect, but cute? Yeah, I'd like it to be cute. Also, don't be afraid to move your canvas around like you would paper. If you can get better lines at a certain angle, then move the canvas. Don't torture yourself like I tried. It's not worth it. It does nobody any good. And then you have to redraw it several times. Okay, and now I want to work on the layer with the floral elements, and I need to move one of those leaves. It's an awkward place, so I'm going to go to the selection tool, and here we go. Use that free hand, I think it is, and I don't have my glasses on, so bear with me, and move that leaf up. And now I can make it look a little bit more natural, like the elements are resting in the glass better than before. Okay, I'm adding a new layer, and I'm dragging that layer beneath both the glass and the floral element because I want to add water, but I don't want the water to cover up the stems. I want the stems to be visible, and I also don't want them to cover up the details on the glass. So I put it as the bottom um, layer, and then now that I like the way it looks, I combined the layers. And now we have two more elements to draw, and I'm correcting right now the color of these flowers. And once I have the color I like, I literally just drag it over there. And now you can see the difference. And I use the color fill, like auto color fill. There we go. So now I'm going on a new layer. So I can make this cute little teacup. And I make this teacup very similar to the way I made the first one. I get down my base color, make sure all the edges are closed up so that I can color fill. I make sure I get that handle taken care of and the little, I don't even know what to call it, but the base of the teacup also painted. And then after that, we figure out how to do the tea that's inside the cup as well as the design on the cup. Just watch me and then do what I do. It'll work out, I think. All right, now I'm picking a slightly gray-green color and I'm adding a new layer and making it a clipping mask so that I can draw different colors on top of the cup. I could use Alpha Lock for this, but since I wasn't sure if this would be the final color or design, I went with the clipping mask to start. Now on a new layer, I'm going to take care of drawing in the tea. And then make sure you close up any open gapped areas, slide to make sure that the color fills appropriately. And now I'm getting the shape of the T correct because it was a little lopsided. Let's be honest, wasn't looking so good. And like with the previous cup, I'm going to add a layer in between the cup and the tea so that I can draw this shadow. So this shadow that you're seeing is underneath the tea, but on top of the layer with the foundation cup color. And now's the part where, on a new layer, we're going to add another clipping mask, and we're going to add the detailed designs. Your design, as I've said before, can totally be different than mine. These are your teacups, right? I don't know that these are the kind of teacups that I would keep in my home, but they're what I drew. I think for me in this particular case, dandelion was in mind for the design on the side of this cup. So I was trying to keep on theme. Now I make sure I add that lighter orange brown color. Swirl. That's what I call a happy tea right there. Now the last element before we start getting into the seamless pattern part, and that is the books. These took a little bit more time than I really liked, but I did think they were worth it. Right now I'm going to hold down to get the straight edges automatically. So I'm drawing my line, holding down until it straightens, and only lifting once I have it adjusted to where I want it to appear. And now making sure all the edges are closed up so that way I can color fill. I'm putting a layer beneath the uh, green that we just did and chose a slightly darker green so that I can more easily create this, the shadowed side of the book, some perspective, not too fancy of perspective, just a touch, and filling that layer. And now we have a book. On a new layer on top of the green, I am doing this yellow. I do change some of the colors of the books in a little bit. Primarily, there's just one. I just wasn't a fan of the blue that I chose, but we fix it. I show you how to fix it. And I'm just trying to get my yellow book drawn out here so that I can fill. And now that I have the sketch removed, you can see how they're starting to look. So now I'm going to go back into layers, add a new layer, as well as turn on my sketch. And now I'm going to do the light pink. And the light pink I'm putting right here next to that very yellow mustard book. Now I'm going to add another layer. I want it to be on top of the green book, but behind the pink book. Now that's just me. As long as you're really good with your lines, you can pick wherever you want your layers to go, unless you absolutely need it on top like I do for the green book right here. Closing up the edges, and then I'm going to do color fill. This is the book that I end up choosing a different color for by the end, but again, you'll see. I wish that I had chosen the color before I combined the layers, but I ended up combining the layers, so you'll see how I fix that. But every mistake is a learning opportunity, if not for me, then for you. And there's a lot of different ways to perform the same solution, and so you know it's okay to make mistakes. And in fact, the way that I learned how to make mistakes was by watching other artists who were willing to make mistakes and show me how to fix them. So here's the really good news. We've got the base of the books done, and now we're going to combine all those layers. And the bad news is we still have to add the detailed design, but that's okay. That's okay. We're so close. So I already have the design sort of sketched out, and in this case I wanted to use the pink on the green because red and green are complementary, and I thought that, those colors look really nice together. Or, at bare minimum, they contrast enough that they really make that pink stand out against that green. And then once I like where they're placed, I end up combining the layers. But first I'm getting them just right. All right, and now combine by pinching the layers together, duplicating, and then I flip them horizontally and adjust. And yeah. And I add the last additional details. Again, it's your book, so if you want to change up your design, by all means, go for it. This is what designs I came up with. I am definitely an antique sort of gal, so I wanted them to have old-timey feels. So now I'm adding yellow on top of this blue. This is the moment that I realize I really don't like the blue background, but I finish up the details on the clipping mask first before I decide I'm going to change that color. All right, so I'm going to select the books. I'm going to the selection tool, I'm going to automatic, and I'm picking the one book that I want, picking the color that I want it to be, which is like a dark blue-gray. Essentially, I just wanted the saturation down a bit. So now we fixed that book. Look at that. And now I could put the clipping mask layer back on. And look at the details. Now the actual yellow stands out against the blue-gray book. That looks much more blue than gray. And now I use brown for the finishing details on the last two books. It is the same brown that I used for the details on the flower as well as the tea. So again, limited palette, trying to keep all the colors that I've been using to an actual limit and trying to figure out how to make those colors that I have been working in work side by side and together. Okay, guys, so here's the good news. We have our elements. And now we're going to put our elements in a group. So I'm going to slide to the right and grab all of the layers. And I'm going to group them by hitting group. I end up deleting my example because you guys don't have that layer anyways. So that way I free up another layer that I may need as we work on creating the design. So I just duplicated the large teacup at the top. I'm going to, there we go. I can get rid of that sketch now. So now that I have the large teacup, I am going to make it a bit smaller, and then I'm going to do what I call art Tetris. Some important things to note. You want to make sure that you are keeping the elements that you are moving around. You want them on the canvas. You don't want them off the canvas. So everything needs to be inside of this square, okay? Don't let anything bleed off the edges yet. I will show you how we deal with that after. Now that I have the two tea cups where I want them, I combine them onto one layer. Now I'm doing the books because the books are another piece that are, I think, a big element that I want to stand out on the design. So I resize it, I place it where I want, I duplicate it, I slide it over, move it around, resize it. Once I like where it's at, and making sure it does not bleed off the edge, and I make sure I do a little bit more movement, but then I combine those two layers together. So now they are one. So the books are on one layer, the cups are on another. I'm going to do the other teacup because that's another important element. I mean, technically all of them are important elements, but this piece particularly is focused on the tea and the books. And the floral elements are, I would say, the secondary. So these are the primary elements. And like I said, I'm just playing some art Tetris, being careful to keep the art pieces, the art elements inside of the canvas square and have nothing bleed off. And there's a reason for that. We can't make it a perfect seamless pattern if we start having things bleed off the edge first. We can't do it that way. It doesn't work, not mathematically. Now I'm going to grab the dandelions. I could have and should have put the dandelions on one layer initially, but I didn't. I end up doing that by the end, but again, just to help keep everything organized. It works fine, as you can see here. There's no issue, but just in terms of keeping as many layers available as possible and also finding my layers as easily as possible. So I combine all those dandelions together on one layer. I duplicate the other dandelion option, and now I utilize that. And now that I have them where I want, I combine them. I struggle, but I get there. And now I end up combining them here because I'm like, they really, they should be together. They belong together, right? All right, I'm going down to my original elements again, and I'm grabbing one of the floral ones and I'm bringing it to the top. Now, I'm also deciding I'm going to grab some more of those floral elements because these are like the fillers, right? These go in the spaces. I apologize if my voice is going in and out. I am getting over sick, and this is a lot of talking for me right now. All right. So now I have selected my tea, and I use the selection tool to separate this tea bag from the other tea bag, and you'll see me do it again here so that I can reposition the elements how I think they'll fit best with the piece. I do find that in general, when creating seamless patterns, working in 2 and 3s tend to be a really good way to ensure that you're getting the elements spaced out nicely. So you'll notice a lot of my layers for the primary elements for like the book, the teas, the teacups, those are in 3s and 2s, depending on how large I want them to stand out and their shape and whatnot. And I'm just doing some floral element art Tetris. Just moving things around, trying to also keep in mind the color composition as well, not just the physical composition of the items or the elements, but the color composition. So I felt like there was a need for this light blue, light gray color to be present in that top portion of the piece because there wasn't enough up there. And you can see that I have sort of this open space right there, and that's because I do have an element in mind that I want to put there. And honestly, I probably should have made it one of the first elements, which is this the vase with the floral elements. I should have done that probably first because of its size and shape. It just takes up a lot of space, and it would have been wise for me to um, put that as one of the primaries, and it ended up being like a secondary. We are able to make it work though, but I would recommend go with like the largest shapes first, and get those situated before you start working with the smaller shapes like the floral elements. All right, so the last one that we haven't grabbed yet is this like leaf branch thing. That's the technical term. And so I'm just going to grab that, move it around into some places, and I'll show you how we end up filling any awkward spaces that we find afterwards. So yeah, I'm just feeling out the piece, looking for any colors, uh, like uh, like I said, almost color composition where there needs color variation or color added to balance out the piece. Yes, the shape also helps, but you want to look for both. The piece would look really weird if there was, maybe not weird, but you would have a very specifically different type of piece if you had certain colors clumped together. And we're not trying to clump any specific colors or shapes together. We're trying to have a what looks to be a spontaneous, like basically like tossing the elements on the page and just allowing them to coexist side by side. Perhaps a better way to say it is we're looking for asymmetry, not symmetry. All right, I accidentally lied. There is one more floral element. The last one was not the actual last one. We have these pink floral flowers that we have not used. So I'm going to start using the selection tool and separating ones from one another. So that way I can figure out where to place them and where they'll look nice. So at this point, I decide looks pretty good. So I'm going to swipe from left to right and grab all these pieces that we just added here. And I am going to group them. And now that I have them grouped, I'm going to flatten. Now, you'll notice that I have the original just in case, the original elements I painted. I'm not getting rid of those. Just in case. Let's not do that. So I have them there. And then I have this layer, which is what we just made at the beginning of our pattern. This might be difficult for me to explain, but try and stick with me. So notice how when I select that layer of elements, it doesn't reach the edge of the canvas. That's because none of our elements currently bleed off the edge of the canvas, and that was with a purpose, so that we can actually make it a seamless pattern, not just a pattern that happens once that bleeds off the canvas. So on a new layer, I am putting in this background color. It may be difficult to understand why. I'm going to try and explain as we go. So I'm going to select both that layer and the one beneath it so that I can demonstrate this, okay? So when you grab the two and you group them, okay, then we hit the select button. Now, because that back layer fills up the entire space, it actually grabs the entire canvas. That's what we want so that we can mathematically make an actual repeat pattern. Without having it reach the edge, mathematically, the pattern will not line up. So as you just saw, I made duplicates of this and I put on the magnetics and the snapping in the transform area. What we want to do is make sure, I end up taking off magnets, that we get the yellow line vertically and horizontally so we know that it is perfect mathematically. Look at that. And now I can let go. Okay. So I dragged from the bottom right corner up to the top left, and now I'm going from the bottom left up to the top right. And I want to make sure that I am, that it gets the yellow so that we know with certainty it's mathematically perfect. Now we're going to go from one of the top corners, top right, down to the bottom left. Make sure it mathematically gets that yellow line. Same over here. Get those yellow lines. There we go. And now it would technically be perfect, but what it's actually showing us is there are some gaps because there were in fact gaps, of course, around the edges of our piece before, so that way it wouldn't bleed off the actual edge of the canvas. So right now you can see I don't have the background attached when I take out the background. So I'm going into each layer and I'm getting rid of that little square that we had behind it. And this will make it easier in case I need to move around or duplicate any of the elements, which you'll see I'm making all four of those squares into the same group. I'm going to combine them, and now I have everything once again on its own layer, and then I struggle to move it out of this group. Once it's out of the group, I delete the little group because nothing's in it. And now I put the background back on so you can see. All right. So now I believe that it would be a good idea for me to add in that vase a second time in this space. So I decide to go in and select these elements on that layer we just combined. And I'm going to move these down and out of the way a little bit. I take off the snapping. There we go. I'm just moving it around, seeing what works. And I'm just trying to create space, so I'm going to also move these by selecting them and scooting them over. Now I'm going back into my original elements, the individual ones right here, and I'm going to duplicate that layer and bring it up. Now I can adjust and resize so that this fits perfectly in that space. I do end up changing so that it turns the opposite direction because we want it to, we don't want the elements to face all the same way or be all in the same size. So I wanted to make sure that I'm moving things appropriately. I also had this extra flower piece, so I decided to, move it, find a space for it, and this is where I decided it should go. I can tell there are still some areas that need attention, so I copy and paste. I take that element and I move it now over here. And I'm pretty satisfied, so I combine the layers, so I'm still on the now one combined layer. And I'm seeing, just some gaps that I can fill. So I'm going to go in and grab the elements that I think would go nicely in other places and copying them and moving them around. Art Tetris. And then here I am grabbing another element, copying it and moving it to a place that I feel it just will nicely fill without too much effort. I'm zooming in and zooming out so that I can see the pattern from different perspectives. So I end up deciding that this space could use a little bit more florals. So I put the floral design right there and I erase the ones that I don't need. So that one and the one beside it. There we are. And now I combine. So for the most part, we're pretty close to done here. I spoke too soon. I found a spot. But that's okay, because I just grab this, copy it, move it over. Here we go. And I combine. Since we already did the first mathematical move, our elements bleed off the edge, which means that when we select this layer, it selects it all the way to the edge of the canvas. So we don't have to do that step we did before. We just need to duplicate only the pattern itself this time. We don't need to add anything else. We're going to slide from right to left and then grab the other layer and slide left to right. Sorry, my bad. I know my rights and lefts, kind of. And now we can see, by moving it, we can see if there are any areas that we are, again, finding need just a little element added. So in this case, I end up picking the slightly darker pink, and I end up combining the layers back together and just painting directly in a floral element that I feel will, match with what's already in existence. So I had 4 of these little flowers. I end up adding a center to them and forgetting to do the center on one of the 4, so there's only 3. But I do fix it at the very end. I don't think I fix it on camera, but I do fix it at the end because I do see it, and I'm like, that's a problem. So, yeah. And as always, combine onto the same layer. So now we're going to check out our pattern some more. We're going to duplicate it. And now, instead of working right to left and left to right, we're going to work top to bottom, bottom to top. So we're going to slide one layer up and slide the other layer down. We want it all to be mathematical. So look for those yellow lines to confirm that it is lined up perfectly. And now here we go. So now we can see if there's any awkward spaces. I think it looks okay. And so I end up duplicating it 3 times. So now I have 4 layers, and I'm going to do the transform tool, and I'm going to shrink them down to fit perfectly in the square. And so it's showing you that it can in fact be a pattern. And there is our pattern. And it all perfectly lines up. If you are still here, thank you so much for watching. This is how you make a seamless pattern. If you are still struggling with the seamless pattern and you want me to make a more simplistic one, let me know down below. As always, thank you so much for the support of my channel, and please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. And I'll see you guys really soon at the next tutorial. Okay, bye.